All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Peaks here today with Brent Woodall, who is an attorney from the Florence area, I believe, running for the State Auditor position. It's great to come on and talk with me this morning. Brent, how are you, man?
Hey, doing great, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Hey, man, it's my pleasure. So, Brent, how long have you been practicing law?
Since 2002, graduated from the University of Alabama School of Law that year, passed the bar a few months after graduation, and been using my law degree ever since then.
Well, what on earth motivated you to jump in this state auditor's race?
Well, Chris, what motivated me to get in this race is what I learned about the state auditor's office during the time that I was a state employee. I spent over 10 years in the past few years as a state employee. A little over 6 of those years was with the Attorney General's office as a prosecutor. But also for a time, I was the chief of staff for a member of the Alabama Public Service Commission. And it was during my time at the Public Service Commission that I found out not just what the state auditor does, but more importantly, what the state auditor does not do. I learned that the state auditor doesn't audit anything. And it's because of what I learned related to that that motivated me to get in this race, because there are some things that we need to do as a state with our state auditor's office and with another office that the legislature created way back in the 1940s that would save this state money. It would reduce the size of government, and it would restore respect to the Constitution.
Wow. You know, I didn't know the state auditor did not audit until a few weeks ago when I was asking about something, and they sent me to 15 different offices to tell me who was writing the checks, and I still ain't got an answer on who's writing these checks, but I guess that's a different story for another day. So what all did they do? I was thinking they kept up with school books and school buses and desks and that type of thing?
Well, they keep up with everything that rises, every item that rises to a certain dollar level, and that's how you find out how I found out what they did not do. Because what would happen at the Public Service Commission is every couple of years you'd get a memo that would come around, and it would say, hey, the state auditor's office will be here next, and we'll just say Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to take inventory, and you need to have the stuff that you're responsible for that rises to the requisite dollar amount in your office. And for me, it was a computer, I think it was a couch, and there was one other thing. And an employee from the state auditor's office who would take the inventory would come in with what I call a Walmart gun, that scans the barcode, and they would scan the barcode sticker on those items and then leave. That's what the state auditor primarily does now, or the office. It takes inventory. There are a couple of other things of importance that the auditor does. They serve on the Board of Adjustment for the state, and they also appoint registrars from around the state. But as far as auditing, they do not do that. As I said a couple of minutes ago, another department that was created by the legislature back in the 1940s, has that responsibility now. But we're going to change that when I'm your state auditor.
All right. So you mentioned a while ago about the registrars. They pick the voter registration of each county?
Well, it's almost in every county. Jefferson County is an outlier on that, but there are 3 registrars in every county in the state, and the state auditor has a responsibility of appointing someone in each of those counties to fulfill the job of registrar, which is a very important job. I mean, let's face it, we've seen some shenanigans with elections, not only in Alabama, but also throughout the country. So making sure that we have accurate voter rolls, and that only people who are qualified to be voting actually on those rolls, is a very important responsibility.
Yeah, that seems like that could be pretty easy. Go there and request a ballot, and somebody ain't voted in, been dead 10 years, and this seems like it would be a lot of stuff you could pull off that wouldn't be that hard to do. You pull 200 or 300 votes here and 400 or 500 votes here. That's
Oh, you could change it. When I was at the Attorney General's office, I mentioned I was a prosecutor there for just over 6 years. There were some voter fraud cases that took place during my time there that were just unbelievable. And one of the things that we have to have are free and fair elections. And you cannot have fair elections when, as you just mentioned, when dead people are still on the voter rolls, and that and shenanigans are taking place with elections. And so that's one of the things we need to make sure of is that those voter rolls are accurate.
I mean, you remember back that 98, I believe it was, that Woodward Hale race. They were going into nursing homes and having people sign absentee ballots and vote with a couple hundred votes from nursing people didn't know they voted for it. That changed that race. It was locked up in court for a year or a couple of years. You said you worked for the state Attorney General's office and then for the Public Service Commission. Who was the Attorney General and the Commissioner that you worked for?
Well, when I went into the Attorney General's office, Bill Pryor, who is now a judge on the 11th Circuit, was the Attorney General. And then, at some point in my employment there, he was appointed to the 11th Circuit, and then Troy King became the Attorney General. So I served under both Bill Pryor and Troy King. And at the Public Service Commission, I worked for Chip Beaker.
Chip's still on there.
That's correct.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I thought so. All right. So you get in there. What's going to be your first act of duty when you walk in the office that day?
Chris, from the moment I walk into that office, my number one goal is to restore the functioning of auditing, or the function of auditing, back to the auditor's office. I am going to work with the legislature to dissolve that department that was created, as I mentioned, in the 1940s. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about that if time allows us now. But back in 1949 was the actual year. The legislature created this thing called the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts. And that's just a real fancy way they came up with of saying auditing. But they moved the auditing function from the State Auditor's office to this new Department of Examiners of Public Accounts. And when you find out a little bit more about that office, it really lets you know why we need to restore that function back to the State Auditor's office. Let me talk about that for a minute. First of all, everybody in this state, if you were to ask them, who's a state auditor? Most people, maybe not everybody, but most people would be able to say Jim Ziegler, because you get a chance to vote on the state auditor, as you will next May 24th.
Well, I think you're giving voters a little bit too much credit. Some of our voters don't know who the governor is.
Some may not, but I got to believe most do, though. I mean, most Alabamians, I think, are concerned about our state government, as they should be. But if you ask somebody, who is the head of the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts, they're going to, most likely look at you for the most part and say, the what? Because they've never had a reason to hear of the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts. So they don't know who's doing that job. Here's the other thing. The person who runs that department is paid very, very, very well. Last year, they made over $209,000. They made over the combined salaries of Governor Ivey and Auditor Jim Ziegler combined.
How is that possible?
Well, it was a creation, and still is a creation, of the legislature. And so you would actually have to ask, representatives from the legislature, both representatives and senators, about, the salaries and how they decide what to pay the people who run that office. But when you throw in the second in command at that office, who made well over $100,000 last year, you're getting into some, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if again, going back to my first day on the job, I am going to be working with the members of the legislature, both in the Senate and in the House, getting them to dissolve that office and restoring the auditing function, as I've said, back to the State Auditor's office. And in doing so, we do those three things I mentioned earlier. First of all, we save the state money. And I've just told you how much money. You can't nail it down exactly because of all the, the perks and the contributions to the retirement fund and all these other things, state card usage, things like that. But let's just say that we can save, let's just say $300,000.
Well, I was thinking about how many employees are there. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no,
but
that's
a
fine.
lot of money.
Oh, yeah, and like I said, it adds up for a while. Now, here's one of the things about it, though. We're still going to need the auditors to do the auditing, but it's just the management. By eliminating the management and letting the state auditor be the manager of that job, that we can save that money. Is it possible that once we've made the move that we can save some more? Sure, but we'd have to, first of all, the goal is to get it transferred back, save the management salaries and all the costs and expenses along with those. In doing it, as I said also, we actually make government smaller.
So, is that the position you just mentioned, are they the people that are responsible for keeping up with that? Because I'll call them like, hey, why is there $2 million still missing from the first round of COVID money? The $3 billion from the president. Now we got $800 million that's missing. I mean, I can go there, and there's billions and billions and billions of dollars missing, and then they want to put out 10% 10-cent gas tax. Like, kind of aggravates me a little bit. So, I mean, who's that? Are they responsible for keeping up with it?
Well, Chris, they're responsible for auditing where that money is spent, how it's spent.
Great, I got to know who to call now.
And I'll tell you again how I found out. I go back to my days at the Public Service Commission, because after I found out that the auditor didn't audit, my curiosity got to me, and I decided I had to find out. Well, if they're not auditing, who is doing it? And the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts put out, these audits, and they break down the expenditures of money, how it's spent, for what purposes, and it's detailed, but we don't have to have that office doing it. As I mentioned, we make government smaller, but we do it without jeopardizing any services whatsoever. That is important, because the auditor, the state auditor, will continue the auditing role of government, but we do it by saving money and, again, making government smaller. And I just want to make sure I emphasize that again, that we do it without jeopardizing services. The third thing that we do, though, Chris, when we carry this out in conjunction with the legislature and getting them to make this move, is we restore respect to the Constitution. Because here's something else that a lot of people in Alabama don't know about the State Auditor's Office. Let's face it, where you have heard about the State Auditor's Office over the past few years, for the most part, is when it comes down to budget cuts. That is a constitutional office that has endured more budget cuts than anybody really thought they could handle. And yet they're still doing their assigned jobs of taking inventory, of making the appointments of the registrars around the state, and then also, serving on the Board of Adjustments, as I mentioned. But in the state constitution, the 1901 Constitution, you will find in the line of succession to the governor, the state auditor actually comes in higher than the Secretary of State.
Really?
Which, yes, sir. And like I said, most people in Alabama, I don't think, know that, because they never really had a reason to sit down and study the Constitution from that aspect. But that fact tells us the importance that the drafters of our 1901 Constitution put on the State Auditor's Office. So at the very time that we see that budget being cut and cut and cut again, we also see in the Constitution the importance that the drafters of the Constitution had for that office. And those are in direct conflict as far as I am concerned. By restoring the full function of the office to the State Auditor's Office, we are going to restore respect to the Constitution. Okay,
so if you can get this done, that office eliminated, which good luck with that, because we got a Republican legislature, a Republican governor, and they can't get one bill passed down there that is of any importance that I've seen here. And you come in there, and how are you going to handle this when you find $400 million that's been spent and $300 million is missing? Because I would be wanting to know, hey, where's this money at?
Well, again, once the auditing function is brought back to the auditor's office, it would be the role of the auditor to do the audit, to show how the money has been spent, and to make that public in the audits that are published.
But when I sit here and I read hey, there's $2 million missing from this account, or $2 million missing from the fund. I mean, are you going to this person? Hey, where's this money at?
Oh, that's okay. I understand your question. First of all, we are going to make these audits, known to the public so that they are available to see how money is being spent. But what you're touching on now goes back to my work history and what I have done. I mentioned that I was at the Attorney General's office for just over 6 years. For most of that time, I was in the Public Corruption White Collar Crime Division. And I used to prosecute people for misspending money on a regular basis. The last conviction that I had as an employee of that office was of a county commissioner who misspent public money for a personal use. On one occasion, we had 2 counts. On one occasion, it was for himself. On another occasion, it was for his daughter that the money was misspent. We convicted him. He was removed from office based on his conviction of 2 felonies. And then, after my time at the Attorney General's office, Chris, I went over to the U.S. Attorney's office where I was a federal prosecutor for roughly 4.5 years. And during that time, I also got to prosecute white-collar crimes. And it's dealing with those type of cases that differentiates me from the other people in this race. Now, I am not saying that the state auditor needs to be an attorney, because that's not a requirement of the Constitution, nor should it be. But I am saying that with my experience, with my track record of sitting down with the reports from an investigation, going over the evidence that was produced and gained in those investigations, and seeing what they show, I am, again, uniquely qualified to fulfill the role of auditor, because when those audits come in, sometimes I'm fully expecting to find that money was not spent exactly the way it was supposed to be spent. And by looking at what those audits have shown or will show, we can ask the auditor to go back and do a little additional digging to clarify some questions that we might have. Or if it seems to be something that should rise up to the level of prosecution, we can report that to the proper authorities and explain to them my concerns.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're responsible for looking at every county, but I've seen the other day, I think it was in Madison County, some lady stole $200,000, and I don't not want some, or thinking about wants a witch hunt. Because let's face it, if you got to dig, and everybody in government would be in federal prison right now for something. It's just, we've seen all these political, what I call witch hunts with some people over the years. But, it seems like with Alabama now, it just keeps getting more and more out of control. And if something's not going to be done, I don't know where this is going to end. Do you think that you said that there shouldn't, not an attorney. When you said about investigator, are you talking about a lawyer investigating what's going on, or a hired investigator? I don't know if I'm asking the question right.
What I'm saying, when you prosecute, or even when you are a defense attorney and you're looking at audits that have been done, or you're looking at work product, we'll just say, you can look at the information to see what it might indicate. Is this a case where someone has just made a mistake, or is it possible that someone actually has some sticky fingers and there's some problems going on? And in Alabama, we have, of course, our Ethics Commission that has investigators who work there, who can have their own legal department, and you can turn things over to the Ethics Commission. They can look at it, investigate it, they can take action. You can turn things over to the Attorney General's office. You can turn things over to district attorneys' offices. There are a number of ways in the state of Alabama where public officials can be held responsible for economic wrongdoing, we'll call it.
So you got in this race and going against some pretty well-known names. We've all seen Mr. Cook and Mr. Glover and sorry, I didn't think of Scott's name. It's in the legislature. How do you overcome that? How do you overcome the name recognition?
Oh, by just putting my message out there, period. Once people hear that I am someone who found a problem, identified a problem, came up with a solution to the problem, and simply want a chance to implement my solution, working with the legislature to get this done. I firmly believe that people are going to take note. They're going to see that, again, I have the background that would allow me to carry this out. I've mentioned my work experience in the legal field, but Chris, before I ever went to law school, I spent roughly 18 years in industrial sales, traveling all over North Alabama and Southern Tennessee, working with buyers in different industries, maintenance supervisors, engineers, giving them information that they needed on the products that we represented at the time, telling them how those products could solve their problems. And my background in sales, as much as my background in the legal field, will aid me very well as your state auditor.
That does sound like two strong attributes to go hand in hand, legal field and sales. So how much is the auditor, how many employees do they have?
They're down. Sadly, they are down to just a handful now, and that goes back in conjunction with those budget cuts that I spoke about. It really is amazing to me that they are still able to do their job just in the inventory world that they are doing. When you're a government employee and you have items in your possession that are under your control that you're responsible for, that they have to inventory, when they come to your office, as they did with mine, as I mentioned, they're not there long. I mean, they're there with those scanning guns for just a few minutes, if at best, and then they're gone again. And they have to do that because, again, as I said, they're down to just a handful. Mr. Ziegler's even had his assigned parking space removed from him.
Really? They took it?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's as I said, it is unbelievable. I think I said amazing earlier, but it's unbelievable the amount of cuts that office has endured.
Huh. I wasn't aware they took the auditor's parking spot away. This got that bad they can't give him a parking spot.
And Chris, I'll give you the assignment. I'll let you check in and find out, does the head of the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts still have their assigned parking space?
That'll be one of the questions I have. I have a few more I'm going to ask about first on that one. So I think I hope I didn't get these confused. I'm talking to some people. Do y'all have some debates set up?
Well, we had a candidate forum. That Logan Glass, I'm not sure if you know Mr. Glass, he's a really good guy. He put that together, and then that was followed by an online straw poll, unofficial, but an online straw poll. I came in second. That was a few months ago, so I'm feeling pretty good about my position right now. May 24th, we'll be here before you know it, but again, we're just out there getting our word out. Most of the time, though, we're speaking independently of each other.
Because I had tried to mention the other night, and that's why I think somebody said they facilitated, they had one set up because I said, hey, I can facilitate one on the Skype call if the other guys would be interested. And they said, well, we're going to have one set up, and I said, okay. I said, but if you're interested, I'll still be gladly set up a Skype call and post that out there. So, if the other candidates are interested in it. Let's see, what are the questions I have for you about that office? Why was the legislature wanting I remember somebody told me that a few years ago the legislature was wanting to do away with the office totally. Was it to give all?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Was it to give all power to the state examiners position?
Well, you would have to ask again the legislators about why they were doing that. But I would like to point out here in response to your question that I've been one of those kind of people. Even when I was a teenager, I was keeping up with politics, and during my lifetime, there have been at least two that I can remember candidates for state auditor who made the pledge that when they were elected state auditor, they were going to work to abolish the office of auditor. That's just completely the wrong thing to do. I mean, first of all, to do that, you'd have to go through the process of getting the legislature to put it on the ballot because it's a constitutional office. Then you'd have to have the majority of the people to vote in line of abolishing the auditor's office and moving all the functions either to a newly created department, newly created agency, or move everything over to the department that I've mentioned a few times. Getting it out of the legislature just to do that would be, a huge endeavor to get it on the ballot. Then you have to get the people of Alabama to vote that way. But again, the people who are responsible for spending the state money and for accounting on how that money should be spent should report directly to the Alabama citizens and the Alabama voters. And that's not happening now with that department. That is one of the main reasons we need to eliminate that department. But at the same time, if we were to go through a process of abolishing the auditor's office and moving the rest of the functions that remain there to another agency or that other department, we completely eliminate the people of the state of Alabama being able to hold someone, a statewide elected official, responsible and keeping them in check for what they do.
Yeah, that's laughable to think that somebody's going to campaign to end their own job. It's like it's laughing at people run on. We're going to abolish term limits. You know how long I've been hearing that? I'm going to get rid of my own job. So, I mean, what would you think? And you may have already touched on this a while ago. Is there anything that you think differentiates you from your opponents that you would want the voters of Alabama to know that this is why you should vote for me?
Oh, sure. My skill and experience as an attorney, okay. Period. As I said, I have looked over reports that were generated from investigations. I am someone who, as a prosecutor, have been able to say, hey, this person that we've been investigating has not committed a crime because of, ABC 1, 2, 3, however you want to lay it out. We're just not going to be able to prove they did anything wrong because the evidence doesn't show that they did. At the same time, I am someone who has looked at reports and have seen, no, this person clearly needs to be prosecuted. And follow through with that prosecution. The other side of what else I mentioned, I spent 18 years, almost as long as a salesman in my life. I've been as an attorney, and in that role, you learn to talk to people. It's really a lot like, as you mentioned, it's a lot like being an attorney, because you talk to people, you try to convince them that a certain course of action is the right thing for them to do, the right thing for their situation that would solve a problem or answer a question. And so combining those two aspects of my life is something that differentiates me from the other opponents in this race, and should cause the people of Alabama to say, you know what, come May 24th, I'm voting Brent Woodall for State Auditor.
Well, I think that's all the questions I got for this right here.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add to it?
Chris, if I could just tell all the Republican viewers out there, they don't know me from Adam's house cat, but I am a long-time Republican. Not only have I, through the course of my life, I've served on the Morgan County Republican Executive Committee. When I lived in Elmore County for a while, I was a member of the Elmore County Republican Executive Committee. I served as president of the Young Republicans in Morgan County. I also served as state treasurer of the Young Republican Federation of Alabama. But the highlight of my time as a Republican was serving as a delegate for President Trump in 2016 in Cleveland.
Oh, wow.
That was a fantastic experience. And it allowed me to support someone who was going to do the right thing as president, which is exactly what President Trump did.
Have you made plans to be a delegate when he's renominated in 2024 yet? Or
we're still a couple of years off, but that we need Yeah, we need him back in the White House, that's for sure. But I would like to also mention, I can remember when I realized I was a Republican, a conservative Republican, and that is back when I was roughly 15 or 16. My father, my mother, my brother, and I went for a ride on a Sunday afternoon, and we were up in the hills of Tennessee. This would have been late 1979 or early 1980. That's as close as I can nail this down. But we were riding through the hills of southern Tennessee, growing up in Decatur. That was not far away. And we passed this house. It was like a ranch house, but on one end of it, there were these mortar blocks stacked up, held together with mortar. And then on top of that, there were these studs. And I looked at that, and I was probably 15, like I said, 15, something, 14, 15. And I didn't know what they were doing. And I asked my dad, I said, Dad, what are they doing in that house? And he said, son, I guess they're just adding on. And it hit me at that moment that under Jimmy Carter and the Democrats who were controlling the government at that time, it had been so long since I had seen construction that I didn't recognize what they were doing. And that's the moment that I realized that the Republican philosophy, conservative beliefs, were what was best for this country and for this state. And that's what I have been pursuing my whole life as a voter and in my endeavors for volunteering for the Republican causes and candidates.
You mentioned that about the Democrats. I was about 17, I guess, when I realized that, because I grew up in a union household, and I think the first time my dad ever voted for Republican, like many Southerners did, was for Ronald Reagan in '84. But it was always Democrat. But then every issue he lined up with the Republicans on. But it seems like the Democratic Party just went so far that they're out of touch with everyday Americans, and I don't see.
Chris, I'm so glad you said it, because a few months ago I'm doing a lot of driving these days, as you can imagine.
Oh, I bet.
And that's a good time to think. And I forgot where I was going, but I was thinking about what has happened to the Democrat Party, because I'm like you. I mean, I come from a background where the Democrat Party was the party you voted for, and there were people in my family who thought I had lost my mind when I started becoming involved in Republican politics. But now, for the most part, even those people realize that the Democrat Party has just left them. And as I said, I was riding around it was a few months ago, and it dawned on me that, I don't know if you like old movies, I love old movies.
Oh, yeah.
The Democrat leaders of today are like Dr. Frankenstein about 10 seconds after he lost control of the monster. They created this situation where these far left liberals are running their party, in essence. And the leaders are trying to put themselves out front and make it appear that the liberals aren't running the party and are not basically forming the philosophy of the modern Democrat Party, but they are. And that's how we end up seeing things like Senator Manchin. Senator Manchin takes a very reasonable approach to one bill. And he is being demonized for having done so. And at the same time, you see these leaders coming, oh, no, we're still working on trying to make this look good. But the Democrat Party no longer represents the average working person in this country and in this state.
No, because I was telling somebody the other day, I said, if right now, Bill Clinton, they'd be calling him a rhino. I mean, because he's essentially would be a moderate Republican compared to what they are today with the issues they're trying to shove down our throats. I laughed. I was watching that debate, one of the debates they had up there in January 2020, and Julian Castro, who had been secretary or something up in Obama, he was talking about reproductive rights. And again, I don't know why that's still an issue every year until there's another rule in the Supreme Court. But he makes a statement, says, and I'm going to make sure that trans women have the ability to have an abortion. And I'm thinking, He confused me for a minute. I started. I said, wait a second. I said, first, that's not possible. And then I didn't know that was an issue. If that's what we're worried about, then we've got a lot of problems.
Well, you mentioned Bill Clinton. I'm not going to go so far as to say Bill Clinton, how he would be classified now. But I will say this. I mean, you go back to John Kennedy. Kennedy today would almost be considered a conservative.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he is somebody who supported tax cuts to increase revenue.
People don't realize, I'm glad you said that, because people when they talk about supply side economics, he was the first one who did it. He cut the tax bracket for the top market. Yeah.
And can you imagine what the liberals in charge of the Democrat Party would be saying about him today?
Oh, I bring this stuff up to them all the time, and they're, oh, that's not true. Here, I can, back it up. And, in our state here, I still see some that are conservative, but, I just don't see anybody that's in touch with the voters here, especially what the voters want to hear. And,
and again, going back to my little Dr. Frankenstein analogy, they can't. They've got a monster on the loose, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it.
And the one thing that is, I've seen the Republicans, they've coalesced to a group of conservatives instead of having so far different wings of the party, and that may be what happened with the Democrats, is they've got such a left-wing agenda that they're trying to shove everybody down everybody's throat. They've just lost touch with the common man, because the common worker just can't identify with that anymore. I mean, the only thing you hear is taxes, taxes, taxes. I mean, how much more can you tax us?
Right. Exactly. Well, Chris, I sure have enjoyed my time with you.
Man, I am too, and it's been a pleasure, and good luck in your race, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Keep in touch, man.
Yes, sir.